Is there like a entry advice for founders that would love to work with companies like Skanska? Like what's the checklist
Keep
that they need
calling
to comply
3
with?
times a day.
Then, I mean, from a partnership perspective, I think, look to us as a partner. We talked a little bit before this. We don't currently have a VC arm. So for us, we don't have oodles of funding sitting around waiting to help startups out. But what we can do is help to get them out on job sites and have real world experience.
So I think the vision that we all see, or where we all kind of see AI going, is that it's fundamentally going to change UI and how people not only find information, but also aggregate knowledge. So we see AI as playing a huge part in solving the if we only knew what we knew problem, like the classic just knowledge management problem. Like AI has a huge play there. I would say like the advice I would give to the VCs is to have more diversity on their boards or in their like where they make their decisions around where to make their investments, because I think that the VCs, the money that they bring to the table, they run the risk of betting on the wrong horse.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Bricks and Bytes podcast, where we dive into construction and AEC technology. Before we get started though, if you're a startup founder or operator responsible for innovation in your company, or you want a deeper, more insightful look into technology in AEC, you won't want to miss our newsletter. From deep dives into particular technologies such as AI, robotics, design, software, and so on. Hot takes from investors betting big in AEC technology, and advice on building tech companies, including the stories and takeaways of the most successful AEC technology founders. Head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today to get this exclusive material straight to your inbox. And now for the episode. Major construction projects are complex, and construction managers know that every day things don't go as planned. Unfortunately, most don't know what and why until it's too late. The best construction leaders know that the secret to delivering on schedule is for everyone to be planning together, committing to targets, and tracking their performance every day. By combining look-aheads, weekly work plans, visual staging diagrams, and daily activity briefings into one multiplayer platform, AFEX is where the world's leading projects are planned and coordinated. Join the largest projects and contractors across Europe, the UK, Asia, Australia, and New Zealand, and discover why at afex.co.
Not here anyway. Okay, Danielle and Mike from Skanska, thank you for joining us. I actually had on my question sheet here, Mike, to fire the first question at you, but Danielle, I'll put you in the hot seat. So yeah, could you, sorry about that. Could you tell us what's your role? And maybe even how you and Mike kind of intersect.
Yeah, sure. So my role is Senior Director of Emerging Technologies. We are really focused on being the eyes and ears of our operations team. So listening to our people in the field, hearing what problems they're having, what pain points or challenges maybe their clients have, and going out and finding those solutions, whether they're in our existing tech stack or maybe they're being piloted by another project in another region, or there's something completely net new that we are evaluating to understand if it would be a good fit or would solve for the problem that we're trying to solve for. Mike and I, we work closely together to lead our team. Mike is very much involved, and maybe Mike, you can talk to this yourself, but we have a global initiative around innovation as well. Mike is very much tapped into that. And but me personally, and one of the things that I lead here is our tech enablement program, we call it. But that is that process from finding an idea and taking it to pilot evaluation, and then in the case that we want to recommend it to the business, making those recommendations based on the findings from our pilots.
Awesome. Okay, well, Mike, over to you. I think when we spoke last time, you used to build software.
I did, and in aerospace, I was on a software development team.
Interesting. So how did you end up in construction?
Yeah, so my origin story is a little bit convoluted. It has always had a construction element, but like many, I took a detour in the multiverse and acquired some skills in the multiverse and then wandered back into construction. So my start was actually in the U.S. Army. So I did my undergrad at the United States Military Academy, studied a program called engineering management, which I'm going to date myself, but this was at the dawn of the digital age. And it was a degree program that was largely to educate officers and how to navigate this kind of ambiguous new world of doing things digitally. So I gravitated to that because I was always interested in like computers and stuff and software. But I did a minor in structural engineering because I knew I was going to go into the Corps of Engineers. And for those of you that know the Army, the Army Corps of Engineers, even in its combat mission, has a pretty big construction component. So that was like where I started. When I got out of the Army, I went to grad school again. I was very fortunate that I got accepted to a dual degree program at MIT. That's kind of for lack of a better word, a salad bar of a lot of different things. So got to explore digital leadership again in my graduate studies, but also construction management, and actually applied to construction companies on the tail end of that degree program. But construction companies really weren't hiring digital transformation leaders, at least not back then. So I wandered into aerospace because an opportunity presented itself, and then in aerospace wandered into IT at a time when aerospace and manufacturing was dealing with the disruption of the cloud, mobile devices, and all the things of like the early to mid 2000s, and acquired a skill set that then became very applicable to construction when construction started to look for digital transformation leaders. And through my extended network, got introduced to someone at Skanska, and that's what brought me over, and I've been in construction ever since.
Cool. Could you tell us, just to cut straight into this here, I think when we discuss, you have somewhere between 200 and 300 software tools. Is that normal?
So it's normal for a large global company. I don't know that number may not be 100% accurate, but it's close enough where we can play with it as like a starting point for the conversation. But let's just say we have a lot of software.
Yeah.
And construction is no different than any other industry. You know, for those of us that are familiar with kind of like the evolution of the cloud, is companies used to build their own software that moved to the cloud, and then over time you either purchase point solutions to solve very specific problems, or you gravitated towards platforms that were solving integrated or multiple problems. And that story plays out for construction. It plays out for many industries, but it's aggregate, right? And like the innovation conversation in construction in many ways has been aggregate. And because we're so decentralized, there's many entry points for how software gets into the portfolio. So we are at a point now, I would say, is an inflection point where there are a lot of incumbent tools. Some are serving us very well. Others are last generation, or you know, in you know, especially in this age of AI, we're rethinking like how to solve the same problem with maybe a different tech stack. But there's also, I think, an incredible pressure that we're hearing from the field to simplify. So we have an effort underway right now to like laser focused on reducing what we call the burden on people in the field. And you know, anytime Danielle and I go out to the field and we talk to innovators, we're hearing two messages. So one is a desire to innovate and embrace new ways of thinking, but also we're overwhelmed by just the sheer volume of tools that we're getting hit with today. And there's only so much change that any organization, especially at a project level, can accommodate. So that's a big part of like Danielle and I's role, is like threading that needle. How do we simplify the environment to the benefit of our project teams, but then also how do we make space to also innovate with some of these new things that are coming into our industry?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Employees, would you say? Was that correct?
Globally, yeah.
Yeah, globally. Like, where would you see there is the most burden from software and effort to consolidate? Like, in which like parts of the business?
Project management, I think change management. You know, what often happens, especially when we're working with certain clients, they have their own project management system. So we use Procore. They may also use Procore, or they use another tool. And there's this duplicate data entry between both systems. So we hear a lot about that. Mike and I were visiting a project last year, maybe around this time, in Boston, and they had 18 different tools. And it wasn't because they were trying to be innovative and try new things. It was because there were 18 tools between the Skanska systems and the client systems that they were required to touch and use daily to maintain their project information.
Wow. That sounds very convoluted.
I'm very curious, like how does the implementation like look like if there's so many tools being used? If someone comes up with a new idea, then like do you roll it all across the like management team of certain number of projects or region? How would that work?
For an enterprise solution? Yeah, typically there's a thorough change management process, and Mike, feel free to chime in here, but you know, we have to also look at project schedules and where are the teams in their schedule. So we would never want to roll out a new enterprise tool to a project that's about to wrap up. We have to be thinking about what's the next project, when's it starting. So most of those bigger implementations, whether it's Procore or Procore Financials is a good example of recent one for us. Over the last couple of years, we had to really schedule out when those tools would be implemented based on the start dates of the projects. You can tackle, you can look at it that way. You can look at it by certain regions, but again, it's all dependent on the start dates, getting people trained up to speed before just saying, all right, we're going to turn the lights on and hit go. We want to make sure that you have everybody equipped with all the things that they need. Of course, they're going to run into challenges and there's going to be a learning curve. So it's also about building that support system for them as they're starting to implement for the first time.
Yep. And what I would add to that is we are a very decentralized company. So with decentralization comes a company that's very nimble and able to adjust very rapidly to market conditions as they change, which is a good thing. But with decentralization, it adds a layer of complexity in terms of how we standardize. And there's a couple of different paths that we have to accommodate. So for our technology partners, for incumbent systems and platforms that are already entrenched, like they are trying to innovate and they're constantly rolling out new features at a pretty rapid clip. So how do we push the things out to leverage the investment we've already, because we're spending a lot of money for those platforms. So how are we making sure that we're realizing the investment for those platforms and also understanding and in some ways shaping the direction they're going in. So what they're developing aligns with what we're trying to accomplish on the business side. But then there's all this just innovation that's happening out in the field. And I would say earlier in Danielle and I's roles, it was more of a push dynamic where we in innovation roles were trying to push things out to the field and get them to buy into this idea of changing. Now we have the exact opposite problem. We have people constantly out on the project teams that are able to have direct conversations with vendors and in particular startups who are very aggressive and like they are not shy about embracing these new tools and ways of working. And we now find ourselves in the role of like we don't want to suffocate that, right? We don't want to be the department of no, but yet at some point you have to put some governance over those things so that you don't have redundancy or you're making smart decisions around where there might be redundancy or overlap. So it makes for a very tricky puzzle, but I think it's also what makes our jobs particularly rewarding is like this is what we're navigating like every day.
You mentioned a couple of things, rationalization of your technology stack to entry, and maybe even like field teams doing their own things. Are there any other, I guess we could categorize these as kind of like themes or trends currently within the construction tech industry? Is there anything else that comes to mind?
What people are requesting?
I mean, just general kind of trends that you're noticing throughout the industry of like technology. It could be what people are requesting. It could be pain points that you're experiencing. It could be like, oh, we're starting to build our own technology because we can't find a solution that's suitable in the market, blah, blah, blah.
I mean, for us, I think some of the big focus is, and I think this is an industry focus as well, we're seeing more focus on safety tech. I think quality management is something that I think we are focused on and seeing a lot more. For us, it's quality from design, early design phase, all the way through construction and when materials are installed. And then, of course, there's the AI trend and every single tool trying to embed some type of AI, whether it's agentic or otherwise, into their tool. So we have a process for evaluating AI as part of our solutions too, when we're looking at brand new technology or existing technology, but we've had to build that out as part of our evaluation process because now it is just hitting us so rapidly. Every tool is trying to figure out how to incorporate.
And some of the other trends we're seeing, which are more kind of broader trends, I think just around general innovation is so there's, because we're a global company, there's a desire from a procurement standpoint to simplify the number of deals and the number of vendors we're working with. So you're seeing a desire to have enterprise deals for some of the major platforms that cut across the entire industry. But then given our decentralized nature, striking that balance of when business units or even project teams or offices have that autonomy versus these enterprise deals. So like there's the procurement versus what we really need conversation. And then just given how startups and software companies like to operate, I mean, they're all about rapid growth, right? So once they get in, they want to explode and sign very aggressive deals or very extensive deals where like the pace that we operate at is more slow and deliberate. Like we need to put things through the paces in the field. And like Danielle mentioned, the timing of that and how that aligns to where projects are doesn't move at the same pace as the software industry. So there's this constant, I think, friction. Like we can navigate it, but there's definitely a friction I think, between how the SaaS world and now the AI world wants to operate and the realities of construction. So we have to navigate that as well.
That's very
And
interesting.
geographically, where do you see the most of innovation coming from in terms of startups?
I mean, Silicon Valley still. There's a lot in New York. I think it's your typical like Pacific Northwest, like down the West Coast, and then New York, and then I feel like it kind of gravitates and comes into the center of the country, maybe down to the Southeast. We just had an event in Atlanta out of our Atlanta office with a partner there. But yeah, Mike, I don't know if you see other trends, but that's pretty typical for software.
Yeah, there's hub. I mean, Boston has a pretty good hub. The Carolinas. I mean, anywhere where you've seen like a gravitation of just software and SaaS companies, like we're seeing. But like New York, West Coast is the big hubs, and then a little pockets in interesting places in other parts of the country.
And would you deal with solutions like from Europe or from Asia, or that's like different local teams would be implementing those?
Well, because we're a European company, some European anchored solutions certainly are part of the conversation. And then our information security and just compliance protocols really dictate which vendors we can work with from other geographies. So there's obviously some considerations depending on where those vendors are based. I don't think we have to go through the inventory of all of them, but by primarily US and a little bit of European-based companies, I would say is the majority of what we work with on the software side.
And is there like a entry advice for founders that would love to work with companies like Skanska? Like what's the checklist
Keep
that they
calling
need to comply
3
with?
times a day.
Cool.
Oh man. I mean, from a partnership perspective, I think, look to us as a partner. We talked a little bit before this. We don't currently have a VC arm. So for us, we don't have oodles of funding sitting around waiting to help startups out. But what we can do is help to get them out on job sites and have real world experience. We know there's a lot of startups out of academia that may not get that experience. They're only really getting the experience of the lab. So bringing them out to the field and getting them exposed to the project teams and some of the challenges they're trying to solve for is really important and something that, we're happy to help them navigate and, get them, of course, out to our job sites. I think as what startups that we work with, things that we look for, we have an evaluation process, but it's very much focused, I would say, on, we do a lot of pilot through it, but we think about it from an enterprise perspective. And as Mike was touching on, some of our compliance regulations, things that we have to follow from a European perspective, things like SOC 2 reports. I feel like I talk to startups every week about I know it's going to cost you money. It's going to be a lot of work, but it's important to have, and it will get you through these processes, these evaluation processes much faster. Some of the things that we require, like SSO, we want to be able to have all of our Skanska employees, especially when it's an internal tool, be able to access everything through SSO if we can. GDPR and CPRA are also hot for us right now, because if we do work with, especially with software vendors who are in the US and are not dealing with European clients, we often hear like, oh, we don't have to comply to that. But it's actually because we are a European company, we are following those requirements as well. And so we expect that our partners will too. And honestly, we've had a lot of back and forth with vendors recently and trying to build partnerships with them, startups or otherwise, to make sure that they are somehow compliant or have some process in place to ensure that they're protecting our personal data.
Of course. Does that rule out a number of early stage startups then for you?
Yeah, what's the earliest stage that people can start knocking on the doors or windows?
Yeah, I know I heard Windows before, but we'll take it.
You do
Mike,
whatever you can.
Yeah, I could take this one. So so we're working with our security and compliance teams to create what I would say is a sandbox that enables us to have those conversations with early startups. We don't expect a startup to have or meet all of our compliance requirements, and we of course see the benefit of partnering with startups while they're kind of still in their infancy. One, because we can better guide their roadmaps, and two, other opportunities for partnership. And this is just the way the market and the industry is going. So we would be negligent to not figure out a way to partner with startups. So like that's a conversation that we're exploring now, is how do we do that in a way that still keeps us, compliant with all the other things we have to be aware of or cognizant of.
Interesting. You mentioned
so it's never too early.
Yeah, fair enough. No, I think it's good. You kind of have to be, right? Otherwise, you're missing opportunity as well if you're not. Do you find you mentioned something earlier, Danielle, about like the rapid pace of artificial intelligence and software and how the opposite the construction industry is, and it's very slow. So by the time maybe you go for a project, you've missed however much good advancement in technology. And that has been exasperated by AI because things have moved so much quicker now. So have you found yourself having to adjust your processes to actually see if you can quickly test some of this technology and implement it fast, or are you not quite there, or is it something that's currently being thought about?
Yeah, it's something that we're currently working on, especially from an assessment evaluation pilot process and understand the ROI more rapidly. But again, we have to keep in mind, Mike and I were actually talking about this the other day and what's like the appropriate duration of a pilot. So in years past, we would say we're piloting something on a project, and that meant we were just using it for the whole project, whether it got used or not. We signed a deal with a vendor and we said, this is a pilot project. So 2 years later, we have these zombie applications that were piloted on this project and then we forgot about them.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we're trying to put more definition around that. Is it 3 months? Is it 5 months? Is it 6 months? That's kind of what we're trying to figure out, what's that sweet spot, because we have to remember that one, we want to target a pilot. We want it to start when the project team is starting the project as well. So that could mean that there is a bunch of demolition that's happening on site and maybe that tool is not being utilized just yet. And it really is going to take off when they start putting steel up, for example. So we have to kind of consider that what happens before and after so that we can get the most feedback from the team so that they can actually utilize a tool, touch it, feel it, use it the way that they thought they were going to use it, hypothesize around like what the benefits are going to be, and then be able to evaluate against those hypotheses to say, yes, this worked the way we thought it was going to, maybe no, it didn't work the way we thought it was going to, and also give them that opportunity to say like, this is not going to work for us. One, because we don't have the resources to manage this, and it requires a lot of back and forth with the vendor and our subcontractors or whoever's using it. Or two, that we just don't have it doesn't work with our existing tech stack. We have 18 other tools to use, and this one's just going to add burden to us versus like help in a way that we thought it would. So I think we are always trying to improve our process to make sure that we're thinking of those things and being mindful of like what is the right timeline and what are the right questions to ask as we are doing those pilots, and how do we support our teams and executing them and making sure that they're set up for success.
And would you have any success stories of these technologies that were successfully implemented from the pilot to kind of real use cases?
Yeah.
Could you share
I can
some?
talk. Yeah. I'll talk about, so CM Builder is one that we've used, or even Drone Deploy.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll talk about CM Builder for a minute here. So that is one that is a 3D logistics tool, and we are trying to make those types of tools more accessible, not only to our VDC teams, but to our field teams as well. So whether it's a superintendent who's a bit tech savvy or a project manager, we typically use Bluebeam. So we love 2D drawings and marking them up and really being able to communicate to everybody on the job site, owners, visitors, subcontractors, where we're going to be and when, what to look out for. But this allows us to do that in a 3D environment. So I think about like, let me keep going. Anyway, we had a team in New York that was like, we're interested in trying this thing. We want to pilot it, early stage company. We're going to partner with them and we're going to help them build out the product. And then they pretty quickly scaled it across their region. And then other regions began to get interested in it. Oh, we want to be able to do that. We want to be able to have 3D logistics easily, simply, and it's all web-based as well. I should have added. So when we rolled that out, we presented that to we have a steering committee, a demand council. So the annual cycles where we evaluate or recommend technology, and they get funding and resources from our IT team. And our COO had said, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. We're democratizing this like 3D logistics thing that we need on our projects. And therefore we were able to get that make that available across the entire enterprise. And now that becomes part of our technology package that every team has access to, every client therefore has access to, every subcontractor has access to on our Skanska projects. Mike, anything I missed about that?
I'm gonna answer the question that they didn't ask, but I think is important to point out as part of pilots is so one, not every pilot that is successful is necessarily going to lead to an enterprise scaling decision. So we have learned through our process that some technologies have a place, and there are scenarios where they work, but maybe not for every market segment or every project. So there's niche tools that are successful pilots that don't lead to enterprise adoption. And then I would say equally important is like duration is not always the best metric for a pilot. I mean, it's you got to put boundaries around a pilot, but like we're really outcome focused, and sometimes an unsuccessful pilot is as beneficial as a successful one. And what I mean by that is when you brought money to the table and you're drawing attention and you're investing in a pilot, there's sometimes a confirmation bias that goes into that. And there's a tremendous pressure that the pilot has to be successful because we're piloting something, or there's already like a preconceived notion around where the technology fits because our competitors are doing, we read something on or heard something on a podcast, right? Like, so there's like for us, it's giving space to hear from people in the field who have actually put the technology through the paces to understand where the limitations are, where are the gaps, and like robotics, I think is a great example of that. And Danielle and I host a quarterly knowledge sharing community that we do for the company internally, where we actually bring people from the field and we focus on a segment of technology, whether it's robotics or drones or whatever. And it's as important to share where the pilots have been unsuccessful because it shapes our thinking and understanding of like the potential and how we engage with vendors and stuff. So like that, the pilot process, it's like when people ask us about pilots and we talk about pilots, it's always like, well, which ones scaled and which ones were successful? But there's this whole other side of the equation that's, I think, equally important and interesting to talk about.
In construction, precision matters. Every budget line, every schedule, every document. But too often, project data is scattered across tools and departments, creating risky silos. That's where ArcDesk comes in. ArcDesk is the all-in-one construction management platform designed to connect your entire project operation, from opportunity through to tender, all the way to handover. With real-time dashboards, cost control, scheduling, procurement, and document management in one place, ArcDesk gives you complete visibility and control. Trusted by contractors, subcontractors, and asset owners worldwide, ArcDesk has powered landmark projects from shopping centers to Europe's tallest buildings. If you're ready to reduce risk, protect your margins, and deliver projects with confidence, discover ArcDesk today. Visit arcdesk.com, that's ARCH desk.com, and see how leading firms are building smarter with ArcDesk.
I'm curious, what's the definition of emerging technology? Does it need to what KPI do you attach to it? Does it have to be cheaper, faster? If yes, like what's the multiple on that? How do you look into that?
Well,
You're both
How do you
smiling
define
ear
it?
to ear.
we're laughing because you touched a nerve, because it's even Danielle and I in our roles, like that definition has changed, and where the line is in terms of what is emerging technology in our industry and what has been commoditized. And those lines are very blurry. So, I mean, it's there's not an easy answer to that question. So like, for instance, drones, like we talked about.
You're
drones.
welcome.
There was a time where drones were exotic, right? There were hobbyists that were using them. There was an emerging technology. Now they're well established. There are still use cases that I think are like thermography and other things that are still kind of unique or specialized. So they're not commoditized yet, but the idea of flying a drone over a job site to capture progression photography, like that's a commoditized. So then where's the swim lane of who owns that? And like what we are in the exercise of doing now is exploring what does the change management look like. So for when things start to tip, they were on the emerging technology side of the fence, but now they've gravitated to the change management to make sure that they've fully been embraced and adopted by operations. Because if they haven't, we run the risk of doing all this great work, exploring technology, implementing technology, but we don't get the saturation and the adoption that actually it's a value. So that's why we were laughing, because I think once a week we have this debate.
Yeah.
Danielle, I'll let you answer it too, because I think you've got a great perspective on this.
Yeah, it's been funny. I shared this with our IT team a lot, and I think it points out a gap, because just because something is not new to us doesn't mean it's not new to a project team or a project team member who's requesting it. So as of late, I've been getting inundated with requests for um, site cameras and which site camera technology should we use? And to me, I'm like, oh, we use site cameras all the time, but there's new, and I mentioned this earlier, but like there's AI components now that are part of these site camera packages. So teams are hearing about them and, oh, should I have that on my project now? I don't need just a live stream. Maybe I want something else on top of it. So it's a really fine line between like what's new versus just what's new to a team that's going to enable them to be more efficient.
Yeah, it's interesting. I suppose it's a good thing to think about regularly though, because it makes you
Yeah.
like reflect. And
But
perhaps
would you apply like a very hard like numbers to it, like that it needs to be 20% cheaper, or we have to achieve 6% of productivity within this specific tasks, or you kind of not that strict about numbers here?
We don't have that type of KPI yet. I mean, maybe that will come in the future, but I think it's more around where just trying to understand how these tools will impact our job sites and prove them out. So for us, I don't think it's there yet. Mike, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that, but
Well, I would say a lot of these technologies are addressing the KPI. That's the hardest to measure, and that's the avoidance of the thing that didn't happen. So by
right.
using the technology, you're making an investment upfront to avoid the change order later, to avoid the rework, to avoid having to take something that was prefabricated and modify it in the field. Like, how do you quantify the thing that didn't happen because you were being proactive and leveraging technology effectively? I mean, you could put that under the banner of quality or efficiency, but putting KPIs against that is challenging, which is one of the reasons why we haven't. But to your point, but we need to get to a place where we can better quantify those, because it makes the investment decisions easier when those conversations happen.
okay. All right, I'll go down a slightly different path. What's your sources for finding new technologies? And let's say emerging technologies.
We get a lot of input from, I guess, our project teams often when they visit conferences or read an article. We get a lot of requests that way. We will sometimes get requests from business planning efforts where we identify a gap or some challenge we're trying to tackle in the next 3 years, and we may want to figure out how to use a technology to help solve a piece of that problem. We keep an eye on competitor intelligence, what's happening in the market. We look at, we talk to venture capital firms all the time and try to understand like who are they working with, what problems are they trying to solve for. And also if we have a specific problem in mind, it's always good to bounce ideas off of them. Are you seeing anybody that's working on this problem in the market that you can connect us with? But that's a few that are top of mind for me.
Any to add, Mike, from you?
Yeah, same. Yep, same. I mean, everything Danielle covered is pretty much our primary watering hole for finding new things.
How about filtering then from there? So you have someone's like, oh, yeah, you must get it all the time. And you're like, oh, this is great. We need this. And you're like, okay. What happens at that point?
Yeah. So we have a system that we built out this year that tracks all of the tools that we are aware of, that we are piloting. And so we're able to quickly look at, all right, do we have 10 other tools that solve the same problem? And if we do, and if they've already been evaluated and we know that they're solid, we can make a recommendation to the team to say, we understand what problem you're trying to solve. There are 3 other solutions that we've already evaluated that solve that problem. Would you be interested in one of these? So we may filter it that way. We have a bigger exercise happening actually on a global scale around business capabilities and mapping all of the tools that we have in our current tech stack, so that 200 to 300 tools to a business capability. And what that will allow us to do eventually is be able to say, again, maybe we have too many tools that solve for that same problem. How do maybe we don't need to evaluate this new one right now, or what are the things that this new one does that the others don't do, and is there an opportunity to potentially replace a couple of applications? Because we know, Mike and I know, we talk to this all the time, there's tech fatigue out in the field, and so the more that we can consolidate, the better we'll be.
How do you see that consolidation happening? Are you on the AI agent side, or are you somewhere else, or have you done any work on it already?
Through our data strategy, we are certainly, exploring the use of large language models, machine learning, computer vision, as like the underlying technology that support how we're applying AI. And I think we're intrigued by where agentic AI is going. So, as part of our data strategy, we're exploring that. But I would say so there's the vision versus the reality of what that technology will deliver. So I think the vision that we all see, or where we all kind of see AI going, is that it's fundamentally going to change UI and how people not only find information, but also aggregate knowledge. So we see AI as playing a huge part in solving the if we only knew what we knew problem. Like the classic just knowledge management problem. Like AI has a huge play there. I think AI will continue to have a huge play in terms of just aggregating information from just very flat, like we live in a very PDF flat document world. So increasingly like pulling insights from documents, taking care of some of the gray work, like things like meeting transcription, capturing action items. But like how I think the concern we have with the agentic AI conversation is you inevitably hit a tipping point. Well, now you're having to manage the agents and the governance over the agents, and what is that going to look like, especially in instances where the agents are making decisions based off of patterns, but there's always outliers. And what happens in instances when the outliers drive the behaviors or there's hallucination. So I think but agentic AI I think is also just an extension of like the integration conversation, the digitalization conversation, which wasn't even solved through basic API calls, and now we're throwing in this additional complexity of AI. So I think we're at a point where we're exploring where all of it's going. We have enough bench strength internal to our company where we're able to make educated and informed decisions on which of these technologies are going to deliver value and which ones are hype. And we're starting to realize, I think, value off the use cases that we've, where we have laser focused the application on very specific things like safety and risk management.
Where do you think the hype is?
I think the hype is around that AI is fundamentally going to change the world. Like we've heard this story so many times, right? Like Web 2.0 was going to change the world. Bitcoin was going to change the world. The metaverse was going to change the world. Everything was going to be design was going to happen entirely in VR. So I think AI is like any other technology. It's on a hype curve. And when it all plays up, there's obviously going to be a place for it. We can't deny that it is a huge leap forward in terms of finally achieving or realizing the dream of big data, getting to like that predictive and prescriptive analytics and the whole knowledge management piece. So the technology will certainly have huge implications and will drive tremendous value, but for the use cases that it's actually well suited for. I don't think it's going to be this kind of universal technology that's going to solve everything. And I think where the hype comes in is where you're starting to, it was funny. I saw this on my Instagram reel the other day, and it's like you can always tell when Silicon Valley is going down the hype when based on the number of billboards that you see and what you're seeing on the bill.
Someone sent us this actually.
Yeah, I
I
remember
saw that.
like 10 years ago, like I when I was going to Silicon Valley, when I was in aerospace, and you got off the plane and you were driving, up the freeway, and everything was cloud this, cloud that. The cloud was going to transform and change everything. Every billboard was cloud. Now it's every billboard is AI. Some of those companies will succeed because they've disrupted or found the place, but many will not. And I think right now there's a bit of gold rush mentality around AI, but also promise. So but it's our jobs to sort through those things. But I don't think it's going to be any different than any other technology cycle.
Have you got like software developers in-house that are developing solutions in-house, and like have you explored like solving perhaps larger problems within the organization or streaming workflows through internal development of solutions?
So we do. Our leadership would say that we are not a software company, but we certainly have people that are capable of developing the solutions where it makes sense for us to build it in-house. So there are some things that we consider so proprietary, or we have such expertise that we have decided to build it in-house. In our safety program, I think, is a great example of where we've done great things there. Sustainability is another example. So we certainly have the capability to build in-house. We have data scientists, so we're able to build the AI chatbots and other things based off of large language models applied to our data sets. And we've I think figured out ways to containerize our data sets so they're not exposed to the broader AI models, but also get the benefit of some of these technologies to get insights into the data we do have. So yeah, we have the internal capability. I think the aspiration is that we could do more, but we're also a construction company. So in a low margins business, it's difficult to make huge investments in technology, but I would say the bench we have is pretty impressive. And we're doing some cool things with the capabilities we do have.
Mike, what would be some of the advancements within? You mentioned safety technology. Actually, both of you a couple of times here. Like, what are some of the advancements that you're seeing within safety tech specifically?
I think we're seeing a lot more, again, AI, but sensor data, proactive recommendations. Some of the things we're talking about now are, even leveraging our internal AI solutions. So we have a chatbot that is built on our Skanska Sidekick. That's a safety chatbot, but it's going to allow people to ask specific questions. We're building out our own. We have a proprietary safety solution that was built by Skanska for Skanska. And there's some capabilities that are going to be included in that. There's integrations with Procore. But I feel like we're just seeing a lot of attention here. And you know what else I guess I'd say is that a lot of companies or startups that maybe didn't think of themselves as safety solutions are starting to play that angle as well, because they see that maybe something that they're doing could actually prevent an injury or prevent loss on a job site.
That's interesting. So like there's something else, and they perhaps got data that they can then use to yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then like technology that's starting to get to a level of maturity that are solving very specific problems in our industry that are common root causes for safety incidents. Like underground utility strikes is a great example of that, right? So like when you don't have the accurate as-built of what's under the ground, there's always the risk of an underground strike. So like increasingly technologies that allow you to kind of see what's going on underneath the ground, that you can load as a payload on a drone or something like that, is increasing our capacity to catch those things before they become incidents, because that's the world we all want to live in, right? Preventative rather than reactive. And that's where AI and some of these other technologies are starting to allow us to move the needle.
What technology have you been trying recently, but couldn't find the right fit?
I've got one, but you want to go first?
Go ahead.
So I would say the very sophisticated or capable autonomous robots. So the ones that look very fancy in a promotional video and are very good at navigating job sites and can seemingly carry a lot of payloads, but are cost prohibitive relative to the problems that they're solving. So I think the robotics, the autonomous robots.
What task would they perform?
You mean you don't like the backflips, Mike?
I've all the dancing and the backflips. I mean, that's like cool to see. But the classic example is you put a payload on the robot to capture either imagery or sensoring, right? So it's the idea is it's wandering the job site with the camera so that a human doesn't have to do it with a 360 camera on their helmet or on a stick. So you're saving them the burden of having to constantly walk the job site, which is good, right? But it's more than just the robot. Danielle kind of touched on it. It's the robot is good, but the robot that is then feeding that data into a platform that has an AI component that's allowing us to analyze the data. Because what's the point of capturing all the data if we don't have the capacity to analyze it? So relieving the burden of the human walking the job site to capture the data is good. But if they're not thinking about the tail end of that, the processing and how we're going to analyze the data, the increase in volume of data isn't necessarily a net benefit. So it's really the business case around some of these things. And I think where we have seen promise is like the robotics companies that are going with the less sophisticated robots. So they're not as fancy. They're maybe not able to traverse everything that they're encountering on the job site, but they're thinking about the tail end data piece of the puzzle, which is like, I think, more interesting to us.
Okay.
Anything else?
I'll add one that I think is, I don't know if it exactly fits this bill, but it's a challenge for us. Everyone's really interested in progress tracking and what solutions can we use for progress tracking, specifically when it comes to capturing 360 photos, comparing them to schedules, to 3D models, etc. But the tools are so cost prohibitive that the teams are we have our own internal tool that we've built on top of Assemble, and we've got dashboards and things like that tap into some of our other systems. But we've had some success, and one of them is a robotic solution that's actually capturing the data. But even then, we're just using that to capture the data, and I don't see that the teams are taking full advantage of the progress tracking aspect of that solution. So it sounds really good. I think everyone wants it. Again, I said that at the beginning, but there's also a ton of data being thrown at our teams when we are using these types of solutions. And so I think we're just trying to find the right fit. Like, what's the right amount of data? Because it has to be actionable. If I'm just looking at a whole bunch of data and now I have issues everywhere all over the building, it's like, well, how do I prioritize? What do I tackle first? What problem am I actually trying to solve for?
Sorry, Michael.
Well, I was going to give you another one that's like very AI specific, and it's not specific to construction, and that's just basic meeting transcription, like recording a meeting and then transcription. So some of the things that we're seeing, so there's limitations to that technology. So like an example is like when you've got 4 people joining from the same conference room, the AI isn't able to necessarily understand or detect which person is speaking. So you lose the correlation of the speaking point to the person when they're joining from as a group to a meeting. But then the other thing is this, and I'm starting to notice is, the one is that the transcription is great. It's a great resource to have that, but it misses things. So you're having to do a QA QC of reviewing what the AI transcription is telling you. So you're still having to keep the manual notes to make sure the AI didn't necessarily miss things, because it does miss things. And the other thing I'm noticing is people are becoming dependent on it. So like we're seeing more multitasking and less attentiveness in meetings because people are increasingly just depending on the AI. So either it fundamentally transforms how collaboration works, which is a potential outcome. Like maybe I think we all could say, well, maybe we have just too many meetings, and this leads us to a world where we're finding better ways to collaborate. Or we recognize that maybe that's not the best use case for the AI, or it's having unintended consequences that are leading to behaviors that actually are reducing productivity. So this is the things that we're looking at when we pilot and test these technologies.
Or maybe wait a few months for the better solution.
Or wait for the better, or if you have a vendor that's a partner, and they bring you to the table where they're receptive, like they're not so bullish on their technology that they're receptive to receiving this feedback and they make adjustments, then that's how you get to the better outcomes. I think on
Mike, I have something to challenge you on that. If you partner with someone and they like adjusting their business model because you have a request and they want to work with Skanska, does that go against perhaps other pressure that they face from like their investors or so on and so forth that are trying to make it into more of a scalable solution that like is able to sell across multiple people because it's easily deployable? So does it kind of like, does what you're saying, I know it's in your best interest, but does it maybe go against like how technology scales across industries?
Oh, 100%.
But they don't have.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I'm very curious. So go.
Oh, well, 100%, but there's different levels of customization, right? So if I'm asking them to fine tune and customize things like drop downs that are so specific to our business or our company that it couldn't scale, I think we accept that that's not necessarily a reasonable request of the vendor, not the best use of their time. So I mean, I think we understand the scalability conversation as much as they do, but I would say when the feedback that we're providing is such that it's a net benefit to the whole industry, we are more inclined to work with the vendors that are receptive to that feedback, because it shows us that they are interested. They acknowledge that they don't understand our industry. So we understand that a lot, especially the interest coming from the VCs and people coming from other industries that are now trying to disrupt technology. Like, we appreciate the ones that recognize that they don't understand our industry, and rather than try to disrupt us, they want to enable us to be better. And the only way they're going to be able to do that is by listening to the people in construction that understand what's needed. So I think when we are communicating to the vendor in the spirit of industry benefit, we want them to listen. And I think in those cases, it's actually in their interest too. And it's actually, I think for their investors, they would want to get those insights and partner with the GCs, because then they are going to get the scale, because now they're building the right tool. But we're not asking them to create like niche tools specific to our workflows to the extent that they can't scale. I mean, I think we acknowledge that that's not a reasonable request.
Fair enough.
Well, not that we haven't done that, but it's still, I don't think it's not a reasonable request.
Okay. What would be a major frustration that you come across when you are evaluating technology? Is there something that always comes up and you just hit in your head again? Okay, Danielle, you're like giving something away.
The list, I don't even know where to start.
Okay.
I think it's very difficult right now. Contracting is a bit of a time suck for us. And I think, again, it's around expectations of what we can expect of and this is just because we're still trying to figure this out and because of how rapidly technology is moving. But we have a lot of back and forth that happens. And it's part of what I touched on before, but because of GDPR and because of all of these like changing and evolving regulations, it feels like it can just take forever. And that can sometimes take away from how nimble and how innovative you feel as an organization when there's that back and forth. There's also technologies where we have to work very specifically on a contract for a project because a project or a client has specific requirements. And then the other thing that can introduce another level of complexity is whether or not a vendor we're working with will have people on the job site, because that requires a different type of insurance coverage and things like that. So I think, I think of, we've got hardware, we've got software, we've got hardware and software, we've got solutions and then services, and how do they all look a little bit different. And I think that just has, for me, introduced a level of complexity that I never anticipated.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest frustration for me is the pricing models. And we actually had a pretty interesting thread of dialogue just the other day. Actually, one of our coworkers actually posted this very topic to LinkedIn. And it's like the SaaS models don't reflect how we are structured as an industry. So, I mean, we are very fragmented in terms of the different stakeholders. So who they are contractually aligned to in terms of having a relationship. Like, so there's some software platforms where the vendor has a relationship with the owner, the designers, and us, but those are all different environments. So recognizing that the way a construction project comes together is different entities, and every one of those contracts is in many ways is bespoke, but yet the way software is structured is it's not easy to translate across environments when and especially when each of those entities is coming to the table with the exact same software, just different environments. So like that is a challenge. And then recognizing that the unit of transaction for our industry is projects. So SaaS companies want to do user-based pricing, or they want to base it off of our revenue. And it's like, well, I can't attribute your software to necessarily moving the needle or contributing to our entire revenue. Similarly, user-based models don't work for us because the user patterns kind of ebb and flow depending on where they are in the
I was going
product.
to ask you about this.
Right? So like that creates a lot of friction at the negotiating table.
Danielle, you said earlier that progress tracking solutions are cost prohibitive. Can you elaborate a little bit more? Is it just because the pricing model you can't get to an agreement on the pricing model? How to ask them to charge you correct? It's just not. There's no value for money progress tracking software or solutions.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of value. I think so. One of the issues is, so in some cases we've got cost that could be $1 a square foot for a solution, and that's certainly cost prohibitive. And to the entry point, so it's very expensive entry point. I had somebody say to me, "Would you spend $250,000 on a tool that, like, on a house that you've never seen?" And I was like, "Nope, that's a great point." So there's that. I think there is an abundance of data that's coming from these solutions, and we still have to try to figure out, like, what's the right data that we get to the team so that they can make actionable decisions with it. The other thing that I've heard feedback on from some of our teams is that we're taking, in some cases, the process of capturing photos and walking the job site and doing that out of the hands of our teams, maybe our young field engineers, maybe our young superintendents who are just learning about construction and the process and the projects, and interacting with foremen and the people on the job site day to day. So by taking that away, are they still getting out to the job site enough, and are they getting exposure? So that's another thing. And then the other thing I think is that I think about with the progress tracking solutions is it's almost like a duplication of some of the systems that we already have. It's combining them all under one roof. However, we have, drone deploy, and we leverage that for both our aerial and for our ground capture. We have Assemble, where we could show progress in the model if that's what the team desires, right? We could do the same thing with Bluebeam. We've got other tools in place that can do this. It does, of course, require a resource. So we have to think about, is that resource worth the cost that we would pay for the whole kit and caboodle and the progress tracking solution?
What would be your wishes to startup founders, or revenue officers within these startup founders about charging models? How would you like them to start a conversation with you? Like, where's the gap here? How to fill this gap?
Yeah, I think specifically, I would love to hear them ask more questions about our existing tech stack and understanding how they fit into it. Do they modify it? Do they replace something that we already have? Do they allow us to integrate several solutions? We very rarely get asked that question. It's just sale, sale, sale. So be a partner to us in that way and try to understand what we have, because we have so much stuff. And part of it's like we are overwhelmed with the number of tools that we have. And then we're inundated with all these new solutions, and we feel like we want to evaluate them and do the best for our business and for our clients. So I think that would be a really good starting point. Also, understanding and don't be afraid to ask the question of, like, how do other vendors price their tools? And I just had this conversation with a vendor about a week ago. They sent us over some enterprise pricing. And when we did the math, we were like, that is not going to work. So looking at, what is it? Is it volume-based pricing? Can we do that by office, by region? Can we say, if you have 5 to 10 projects, it's X, and work on how to scale together, right? Bring them to the table for project kickoff meetings or for lunch and learn, so that we can spread the word and share where there is success with a certain tool. So I think being open to those types of conversations is really helpful as we look to build those partnerships.
Yeah, good.
So in the conversations with startups, when you have them, is it relevant if the startups are founded by venture capital or not, with the context of SaaS pricing?
It can be. I think they just have to really think about I know for them, like, they need to think about how they're going to get paid and how they're going to make money. But part of that is understanding each of the businesses that they're working with. And we're all going to be structured a little bit differently. But for the most part, like, I think a lot of the success that we've had with partners is volume based. I would also not ever go into that conversation, and we get a lot of this, like, oh, we want to be your enterprise partner. We want to be your enterprise partner right off the bat. And that there's a long process. I mean, we're a big organization, right? It takes a long time to move our ship, but we've got to, we can't just assume that everything's an enterprise tool and everybody wants to use it. And so kind of understanding that sweet spot of, like, all right, and this is for us too, internally, like, what is that point where we say, oh, this is really scaling and it's scaling fast. Like, we've got to keep an eye on this and figure out what that looks like.
Yeah. And I would say, like, the advice I would give to the VCs is to have more diversity on their boards or in their, like, where they make their decisions around where to make their investments, because I think that the VCs, because of the money that they bring to the table, they run the risk of betting on the wrong horse. So they will bet on the startup that has the savvy or marketing team, or has the better story, or has the facade of a more mature product. And then the next thing you know, like, that startup is sucking the oxygen out of the room because they've got VC funding. But there's the little startup that a couple of people that exited the construction industry that aren't as savvy, that don't have the connections, but yet they are building the right tool for the industry. And like, the sunlight never hits down. And we're missing opportunities to actually, I think, solve the real problem, like to have the real transformational moment in construction, because there is that disconnect. But the way the VCs could solve that is just partner with a broader cross section of GCs, and don't expect us to bring money to the table to have that conversation. Like, we welcome your investment and your intellect to build and scale these solutions, but trust us to know our business and find better ways to partner with us so that we can, like, collectively move the needle.
We call this episode less SaaS, more real outcomes.
I have a strange question I never asked before, but it's popped to me. Do you have a tool, feature, solution that is constantly requested on job sites, but you can never find a solution for?
That's a good question. Let's think about that one.
Or you haven't managed to successfully adopt, or you just don't think it's possible? Like, are there requests too onerous?
So I could talk to one that's the gap. There's a gap between two different worlds of thinking that we haven't found the right bridge to yet. And it's the schedule as a contractual document, and then the reality of how superintendents and project managers manage their trades and their work week to week. And how do you align the dynamic nature of what happens in the field and the decisions that are made in the moment as field conditions and other things manifest, and they have to make those decisions versus the contractual commitments that have made in a master schedule with milestones and deliverables. Like that bi-directional communication, there's tools that handle the scheduling side very well. There's tools that handle the weekly work planning very well. And there's AI tools and other things that are trying to solve the progress tracking, reconcile, but no one has found the secret sauce yet. And it's still like too many different tools, and then integrating the information from those tools to paint the whole picture is a really interesting puzzle that, Daniel, I think you have some insights on this as well, but like that's the one that came to mind where we hear, go ahead. Yeah.
I thought of a different one though, and I feel like I've gotten a lot of requests for this, but it's around design quality, but also around like clash detection. And there's one guy that I can think of, and I feel like every time I see him, he's like, when are we going to be able to use AI to do clash detection? And I was like, man, I don't know, but that sounds awesome. If we can figure out how to do that, that would be cool. But yeah, I
There are
think
tools out there right now, I think, which can do that. I don't know exactly the details of like the projects, but yeah, there are tools out there right now, I think.
okay, you'll have to share with me what you're thinking of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but now that you put design quality on the table, like that's another, I think, industry that like there's a very interesting conversation because there's that hand over the fence between different contractual entities, right? So we would love to live in a world where we're able to inject constructability considerations into design, but in a way that's actually helpful to design teams, right? So that we're not telling them how to do their job, but we're informing design so that the designs that we receive are of a high degree, enough quality where we don't have to either rework them to make them usable for us or spend a lot of our time in this back and forth with change orders trying to refine or clarify
Hey,
intent
Mike,
or things.
I think this could be the number one pain point of the industry, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I hear
It's,
this so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. I've got a question for you, Mike. So
Yes.
so you have a software engineering background. Does that make you more like what's the right term here? Tougher on a startup? Are you a little bit more or do you kind of like bring that experience? And are there certain aspects of that experience that you bring to the table that you like perhaps other people haven't thought of before that might be listening to this?
I would say it and this, but this is why I was hired into construction, is to be that translator, right? So there's a language that startups and software companies and software developers speak, but then there's also the language of construction. But I think this is like where Danielle and I complement each other so well, is because like she understands software but really understands construction. I understand software and I kind of understand construction. So like us as a team, it makes us more effective to have those conversations. I think if it has made me effective in any one conversation is when I get into a room and I actually get to talk with product teams and talk about translating requirements into features and UI and things like that, because I understand that world and I've led test teams. I've written those requirements. I've been through releases, production releases and things like that, and feature requests. So like it allows, I think when I get in the room with a product team, I'm very effective and I actually enjoy that. But I will also say what prevents me from getting in those rooms sometimes is because we have so many layers of customer success with a lot of the developers. Like you have to go through 10 layers of like, how many licks did the Tootsie Roll before you get to the center of the Tootsie Roll lollipop? It's like that kind of dynamic. So it's, but yeah, I don't know if it makes me better or more effective. But to your point, does it make me tougher?
I think
Yeah, no, to say yes.
Fair enough. Okay. Cool. Okay, Martin, any last question from you?
Yeah, so maybe thinking about the future, how do you both see emerging technologies in 3 years from now in construction? Where are we going?
More robotics, I think. If you look at labor shortage data, I think it's like increasing and there's just more demand across our projects. I think one of the challenges with that will be, like for us, we don't self-perform layout, for example, but we really are eager to figure out how to get our subcontractors to use Dusty Robotics as an example. So how do we, as we think about robotics to help what's happening on our job sites, like what are the right tasks for them to take on that are easy sells for our subcontractors who may actually be doing the work if it's not us that is physically doing the work. So I think we'll see, we already do see, more and more concentration there. It's just how do you get that in the hands of the GCs and convince them that this is the right thing and make it a requirement on all of your projects?
I'm gonna answer that a little bit different way, and I think it's where we as a company would like to see technology take us in 3 years. So I mean, I think given our company's values and where we're focused, I think we would love to live in a world where technology gets us to a point where the economies of scale align with our sustainability initiatives and goals to reduce carbon embodied carbon on job sites. I mean, I think that is an aspiration we have around where technology can get us. Transparency around supply chains, technology getting to the point where it's able to accommodate working mothers and just better work-life balance on our job sites, increasing safety, but in a way that augments the worker rather than replaces them. So take the work away from them that's like contributing to the physical burden and toll on workers, and like how that ties into things like suicide rates and the opioid crisis. So technology getting us to a point where it enables and extends the worker and fills the gaps and takes away some of the pressure, given that there is such a shortage of workers in construction. And then solving the knowledge management thing. I mean, given that we're a global company, AI and all of these things getting us to a point where we truly know what we do know, and we're leveraging the expertise and knowledge that we have, in every nook and cranny of the business. So I mean, that's where I would love technology to, like 3 years from now, realize some of those things, because I think that's where we would love to go.
Okay, Mike, Danielle, thank you so much for joining. We
No,
appreciate
thank you
your
for having
Thank you.
me.
insights.
Have a-
Thank you both.